Welcome back to another episode of A Gift from Adversity. Thank you so much for tuning into the show, and I'm very happy to have another wonderful guest. Before we invite our guest, I would like to explain A Gift from Adversity is my book. It's available on Amazon, and it's overcoming sexual abuse, domestic violence, bullying, and homelessness. I wrote this book and published in 2020. After I published my book, I got a lot of comments and reviews, and I got a lot of messages from people who read my book and told their adversity. And I felt very compelled to start a platform where people can freely talk about adversity and the tools that they used to overcome and a gift that came from the adversity. We've had wonderful guests so far, and then we have great guests coming up. But today, I have a friend of mine who I used to work with. She was my intern when I was running a nonprofit, Genuine Voices. And I have known her for many years, and then recently we got reconnected. So I'm very excited to have her today. And her name is Tanya, aka Tanya the Empress.
Hi,
Welcome
Juri.
back. Welcome to our show.
Hi, Juri. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for having such a supportive show where you stand in solidarity with so many others who may have been inflicted by the journey of life. And thanks for that great introduction. And congratulations on your debut. I cannot wait to read it. I have it on my Amazon wish list right now.
Thank you, Tanya. So, Tanya, please introduce our audience who you are and then what you do, and if you have a website and social media handle, etc.
Okay. So my name is Tanya Dutt, and I go by the stage name Tanya the Empress. You can find me on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok by the same handle, Tanya the Empress. I am a professional singer and performing musician, and also a full-time vocal coach, a performance coach. And I'm also an energy worker, or however you want to word it. I'm psychically tapped in. I don't practice publicly, but I do work with that perspective inside of life a lot in whatever I do.
Great. And then people can find you. You have a website, social media, Tanya the Empress.
Tanya the Empress all the way. Just Google it in, and I think everything should pop right up.
And you are an amazing, amazing singer.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Takes one to recognize one. I'm absolutely in awe and very inspired by all the creative things you constantly do, and you're always just putting, outputting creativity. So that's amazing.
Well, thank you, Tanya. And it's so great to reconnect.
Yeah, it's been years.
Yeah.
And so much has happened in those years. I feel like when you came to me with an offer to be on the show, I was like, the timing couldn't have been more perfect, because I feel like I just got myself out of this crazy cycle, and it was a tough cycle. So seriously, couldn't have been at a better time.
So, Tanya, let's get into our first topic, first question, which is adversity. So, what was your adversity?
Okay, so that's a loaded question, and I feel like there are multiple adversities that happen over, a duration of a lifetime. But I do believe that all of one's adversities have a certain pattern or a certain core fear-based energy or emotion attached to it. And a lot of this is stemmed in childhood. And for whoever else may believe, I believe karma that you may be carrying on from past lives. So energy that you may be carrying on from your past. And I'll just stick to this reality for today. But a lot of my adversity stems from the adversity and trauma that I faced when I was very young. And I'll talk about that, or at least I'll touch upon that, because I feel at that age and that time in my life, I had zero control as a child. As a kid, I could not defend myself, like, so a lot of it was almost like it was happening to me, and I did not necessarily have a role to play in that. As an adult, a lot of the times we act from our subconscious behavioral patterns. So as an adult, I can say there was a lot of self-sabotaging going on, which led to my adversity. But as a child, so okay, long story short, I've uh, endured sexual abuse multiple times, and it was from the age of 7 to about 13, 14. It was a long running thing, and it happened with complete strangers, to teachers, like, which is, well, I won't react to it, but a guitar teacher, and then near and dear ones, close people who I actually knew. So I believe a lot of it started there. I am very lucky and grateful that I did not have to endure uh, as horrifying an event as most people may have had to endure, but it was nonetheless still sexual abuse. So
Well, I'm very sorry to hear that. And did this happen in America?
no, oh no. So I'm originally from India. I came to America in 2010 to attend Berklee College of Music, but a lot of this happened as I was growing up in India, um, and that led to certain behavioral patterns. I started to, I guess, somewhere think that love existed outside of me. And in order to have someone accept me or love me, I had to behave a certain way or be a certain way, in society or sexually as a woman, and especially growing up. And, growing up, I've also lived a pretty uh, very, I love my childhood, by the way, and like my parents couldn't have been more supportive and giving. But I was kept really busy, so I feel I ended up attaching a lot of meaning to result, and then coupled with whatever trauma I faced. And a lot of the people I worked with, or I rode horses, and so I had a lot of coaches. I sang, I did tuition. So a lot of these people who were basically my guides and somewhat authority figures were the ones with who I had these encounters with. And that really put a wall up between me and authority. And as an adult, I'm very outspoken, and I'm all about justice and equality and fairness and human emotion and psychology. I heard this line somewhere, and I really resonated with it. um, I don't have a problem with authority has a problem with me. So a lot of my adversities kind of stemmed from there, but then it also spiraled into addictive behavioral patterns, and I had to battle a very long, arduous battle with alcohol. I That, I think, was the biggest uh, chunk of my life where I would label as adversity, because all the situations that come from that is wild. I've had to deal with law enforcement and deal with people who have taken advantage of me and used my situation to lie. And I don't even know. I'm going off on a tangent here, so why don't you reel me back in?
Well, so a lot of times, I wrote in my book as well. So when you have extreme abusive, like abuse experience, like abused, and then emotional injury,
Mhm.
physical, sexual abuse, domestic violence, all of this, usually my counselor told me, can lead to, for instance, the substance abuse, and then um, or workaholic, like any type of addiction.
Any kind of escaping, it's basically not having the right coping mechanisms in place. And let's just say that I've learned all my coping mechanisms through a lot of hitting rock bottoms.
Yes.
Because I left India when I was 19, and I think the chunk of my crazy experiences and hard knock life lessons happened when I was alone here in America. And when I say alone, I mean my family and everyone were in India. So technically, I was out in the world on my own. I've had to deal with a lot of predatory energies. I had I was unfortunately or fortunately put into these rehabilitation programs because I think my parents got a little afraid that I may be getting into some things a little too strong. So as worried parents would, they put me in a situation which actually ended up being worse for me in a way, because the owner of the rehab or the doctor or whatever tried to take advantage of me after pretending to be all father like. I've had to deal with a lot of narcissists. Let's just put it that way. Nobody believed me. They called in psychologists to reverse psychology me, to say that I'm making all this up in my mind. So I've had to deal with a lot of situations like that where people have actually tried to gaslight me. And eventually 10 years later, what I said was true, and now this person is up in court. He's been put behind bars, I believe, whatever it is. But the I told you so. So justice was brought to that. But I've had a lot of situations like this where people have not believed me, or I have been in certain situations, and it always turns out at the end of the day that, oh my God, these people have been predatory towards many other women. And if you wouldn't have said something, then that ball wouldn't have been rolling. So all that, I came to America, but without having healed any of these inner traumas, you end up attracting relationships that are reflecting exactly that. So till you don't realize where all this is stemming from, what core belief patterns you have built within you as a mode of defense, which is actually operating in your life right now subconsciously. So that's why I said, as an adult, a lot of my adversities, I can say they were self-created, almost like self-sabotage. It may have been unconscious on my part, but it was coming from unhealed past scenarios. So I would keep getting myself into really toxic relationships. And when I say toxic, I mean toxic, and I know you know what that means. So I won't go into detail with that, but obviously I had somewhere a need for being in a codependent relationship with a man. And there was this role that one kept playing out, and I was the giver and they were the taker, but they wouldn't be the taker if I wasn't the giver. So what does that bring us to? A serious lack of boundaries. And where does that come from? From when my boundaries were probably infiltrated as a child. so I think I'm slowly rolling into the question, or the part where we talk about where has this adversity led you, and how do you strengthen yourself from there. But yeah, I would love to know if you relate to any of this.
Yes, absolutely. So I've been through the same in sexual abuse. It was my father and two uncles, and I was stimulated since I was 4, I would say. And then it got escalated after my mom left, and then I was sexually abused from age 8 to 13 until I escaped from the physical and sexual abuse. I removed myself from my father, but when I told my mom, she didn't believe me, so I tried to kill myself when I was
Mhm.
15. And that's in my book, A Gift from Adversity. It's
Yeah.
all out there. And I've told many times that mental health, PTSD, those talks were not there.
Mhm.
Sexual abuse was never believed. And there was no aid for the mental health. And then so I was like called crazy, selfish, and I was kicked out. I was homeless when I was 18.
It
So
also depends on cultures, right? I believe even in my culture, sometimes people like to hush hush any kind of sexual abuse because it could be really bad looks in society for everyone concerned.
so in our town, just to let you know, I live in Foxborough. There was a man who molested, I think, I don't know, hundreds of boys in 80s, and then nobody told till like 5, 6 years ago when they were adult. Now all these men, grown ups, have like stroke, like disease,
Right.
mental health issues because it was never addressed.
Right.
And the perpetrator died, and then he was in Alzheimer's stage when this came out.
Ah.
So he doesn't remember. He did more after he moved to Florida.
Mm.
So now what happens is this town in Foxborough, as a mandatory, they passed a bill and they have a committee. It's called Child Sex Abuse Awareness Committee, and that's
Mm.
formed by 7 members of the town. Very significant. So what happened was they passed a bill where all the employees in town has to take darkness to light training. Darkness two is number two, light training. It's like $25. I had to do it to run the Foxborough Youth production at the Foxborough Cable Access. We have a mandatory 2 adults against 1 minor rule in the building. And also darkness to light is really awareness of signs of sexual abuse,
Hmm.
using the right word to
Right.
teach children, like just like nose and mouth, like penis and vagina. Those are the words that kids need to know,
Yeah.
because otherwise perpetrator can trick you
Hmm.
using different word, and adults cannot touch it. So those are the training that it's mandated. And now a lot of towns that had a problem with educator molesting children are reaching out to our town. How did you do that? Now we're trying to pass this bill to house level in the state of Massachusetts,
Hmm.
so every town can have this rule that everybody has to go through the training of darkness to light. So had we had this kind of training, and then adults watching out each other and in signs, and then how we had aid
Yeah.
back then, it's very different
Yeah.
story.
It's
What I'm saying
really
is,
about evolving times and how open one gets with new developments in
right,
society. I'm sure, yeah, you're
but
right.
thank you so much for sharing your adversity, and then that led to your alcohol addiction. And then do you remember, like, when you snapped out or realized that you are actually addicted to alcohol? What was the
Oh gosh.
realization?
The realization was after a bunch of uh well, what happens when you get when too much alcohol mixes in your body, like there's a lot of emotional upheavals. And I got and I'm, of course, I'm not proud about any of this, and thank God everyone, and including myself, was safe. I got 2 DUIs. I've even done jail time for 30 days, and I'm not ashamed about any of these, because, to be honest, you would think going through all this would be crazy enough, and it was, but I learned so much about how resilient I am through all this. And even the experience for 30 days in the women's prison over here, believe it or not, I made the best of it. And it was actually a phenomenal experience. And I think one of my greatest gifts from adversities, having been through a myriad of them. I mean, I'm just giving you like the two token, sexual abuse, childhood, which led to all kinds of things. And, a big one that I had to deal with was fighting addiction, alcohol. But obviously, in between and around, the amount of things that happened is worthy of a movie or like 10 books. So, but what I learned from all this is I tend to be very lighthearted. No matter what the situation that the universe brings to me, I kind of just sit back and take an observer's perspective, and I become objective. Of course, I allow myself to go through all the crazy emotions that come up. Of course, if I'm sitting in court and they say that this is the verdict, I'm not stone cold. I had to deal with facing and releasing a lot of emotions. And I feel a lot of the times people are afraid of doing that. I'm not afraid of crying. I love crying. I feel tears are the sweat of the soul. You would never push your sweat back into your body after you've been gymming, right? So why do you stop your tears? That's actually detoxifying. So the reason I'm saying all this is because I learned all this while going through all this, because I didn't attach a judgment to my emotions anymore. I just saw feelings and emotions as they came up, And I was like, oh, okay, I'm feeling this now. Just let it out, let it out. There's nothing I can do. And then you just keep taking one step in front of the other. And once you've completely cleansed yourself of all the toxic emotions and the feelings and all that stuff, and you're not in that roller coaster, you can be a little more at peace and try and find the wisdom in every situation. And that's how I live my life. So I see everything as an experience, like I'm in a video game. And I generally am a very positive, upbeat, happy go lucky person. So even in prison, I somehow manifested, and I say manifested, the best situation where they put me in this unit, which was very posh. I had a dog. I had a little Labrador puppy. There were two other people. I think they were doing some program, so they were barely there. There was a TV, phone. I was allowed to walk outside, go outside with it. Like, it was a phenomenal situation, and I got to read all kinds of books. Now, I learned my lesson. Don't get me wrong. It's not like I was partying in there. But what I'm trying to, I guess, say is, no matter what the situation, I find the best in it, or I try to make myself feel as good as I possibly can in those situations. So even after I go through a traumatic situation with an ex, where things have, and oh my God, there are so many stories where that comes from. Someone tried to deport me. Like, you won't believe the amount of stuff that have happened to me, and it's mainly because I'm such an empath. And empaths are people who are so connected to people's emotions that even if someone is doing something horrifying to you, you will still somehow see the best in them and try and understand why they're doing what they're doing and where they're coming from. So obviously, again, boundaries, right? Self-love. So again, a huge thing I learned from all these experiences is self-love, self-worth, how to value myself, knowing one's own value, and then knowing one's own boundaries, forgiveness. And I also see my part in all of this. So yeah, I'll just pause there for a second if you have anything to add.
Yes. So the reason why I wanted to start this show is exactly this, because adversity sometimes has so much stigma, and then so much judgment, and then so much misunderstanding of
Mhm.
us. And why? It's not our fault. It's not my fault that I was getting sexually abused. Of course, if there was somebody else watching, they would have stopped. Somebody else who knew that's wrong would have stopped. And then also, if I knew what it was, I didn't even know what it was. And if I knew what it was, and if I knew how to advocate myself, my human right,
Yeah.
I would have fought like long time ago. But the thing is, this was back in Japan, like in
Mhm.
80s. I had no idea. Nobody believed me.
Mhm.
And there's one TV show that kind of showed like the narcissistic
Mhm.
boy attached to the mother and then bullying the wife.
Enmeshment. It's called enmeshment theory.
Yes. So, anyways, when that TV came out, people started to kind of make a connection between my story and that TV story. And then somebody said, "It reminds me of your father." I'm like, I kept telling you the truth. So I'm just saying, like Me Too movement in this country. Actually, I have a wonderful friend, Rumni from India, that where she was actually sexually abused and then published it, but she was working for the Huffington Post, and then they took it down because she used the real name of the perpetrator. But check this out: in 10 minutes, there's 100,000 views, a lot of views in 10 minutes before they took it down. But then after the Me Too movement started, then she asked her boss, look, this is real, this is happening. So she negotiated, and now it's up after the Me Too movement. So even in America, I think there's so much stigma, especially on sexual abuse
Mhm.
happening between the family members or teachers. People just don't want to listen,
No.
and people want to blame you. And the behavior that you had, addiction that you had you had a help in mental health or coping skills, you
Right.
would have never
Right.
ever had to experience that.
And you know what? I think no matter how much one teaches you coping skills, the whole point or life lesson that you get from adversities is coping skills. I think we become our own teachers because uh, one person's coping skills may not at all be another person's coping skills. So it's really a journey to the self as I see it. And the more adversities you go through, the line, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, is cannot be truer. So I I have come to a point now where I kind of have surrendered, and I no longer fight adversity. I don't even think I label anything as adversity. It's just life experiences, and I have my arms open to it, and I kind of go into it without being resistant to it. A lot of the times a situation can change if our energy towards it is also changing. And of course, I don't mean that in situations where, someone's getting violently attacked or sexually abused. But another thing that I really loved that you said, that you didn't even realize that was happening to you. So because of whatever subconscious thought patterns and emotions and stuff that got stuffed under when I went through all those experiences, as an adult, as I was attracting relationships, romantic relationships, I had no idea that basically 90% of my romantic relationships were all gaslighting, narcissism, and emotional abuse. It may not have been sexual abuse, but there was a lot of emotional abuse, and I didn't even realize that that is what was happening. I just thought we were all just either kids, and of course, maybe the other person wasn't aware either. But the point is, I had no idea that I was in a toxic relationship. It was much later, after going through a few of them and getting some really hard knocks, and especially with the whole alcohol thing, is when I started realizing who I am. And, instead of constantly thinking about what might be good for the other and me being okay with everything, I started really understanding what I like, my needs, my desires, who's infiltrating my boundary, who am I letting into my space. So it's really been a journey to self love and self discovery, and it's a continuing journey. But I'm so aware now, and I feel like it has really helped. And during going through all this, I went even deeper into my spiritual practices. So my meditation, reading, watching, coming across material that all connected me to my source and the way I like to relate to the universe. And I swear to God, Juri, like, I'm sure, positive, last February, my psychic channel blew open. I've always been sort of energetically tapped in, but I've seriously had an opening, like a psychic opening, after going through the last adversity, which was, I think, I really hit rock bottom there. So I'm even more tuned and tapped in. I'm even more connected to my intuition. I'm actually now, in retrospect, smiling and laughing and seeing the gift from adversity. So
Well, Tanya, this means so much to me that you had opened up your story. I had no idea that you were going through that, and I'm very sorry I wasn't there for you. And seriously, from now on, you reach out to me, and I just want to let everybody know who's going through this, who's listening to this podcast or YouTube now. I want to emphasize none of it is your fault, especially when it comes to child sex abuse. It's a crime and justice should be served.
yeah.
And I'm a firm believer that emotional injury exists. And what's the hardest thing is when the emotional injury happens, it's not physically bleeding, but inside of your brain is bleeding. The limbic part, primitive part of your brain gets fired up, and then the cognitive part of the brain gets shut down. And it happened so many times to me without understanding why I hide, why I run, and then why I get panic attacks, why I cannot sleep, why I cannot eat. And that did not have any explanation until I was in my 30s. And then still, I struggle. I'm 45 and I still have those, anxieties and panic attacks. and I don't know when it's going to cease. Like,
You're aware of it now, though. So that's huge.
I
Yeah.
have language, I have logics, and I have understanding, and I'm doing this show, and then discussing with a lot of people about adversity.
Sharing.
Yeah,
Sharing is the best way because you're just releasing it and there's camaraderie and it's out in the open. The worst thing anyone can do is keep it in. So please do not stifle yourself. This is to whoever is out there. Expression, self expression, speaking your truth is the best healing and coping mechanism. It allows, when you become authentic, it allows others to become authentic around you. So thank you, Juri, for hosting such a show and for allowing me to speak my truth and express.
I'm getting goosebumps listening to you, Tanya.
Oh.
Seriously. And then, second part of my question is, what are the tools that you use that was most effective? I know you mentioned a lot of things, but if you were to pick maybe one or two things that was absolutely tangible, absolutely crucial for your like savior, like how did you overcome the adversity using these?
Hmm. So a lot of my tools, Juri, may not seem as tangible to others because it has its place in the world of energy, in the world of meditation, spiritual awareness, understanding your different layers, understanding the reality of reality. And if I were to give some suggestions for channels that people could dive into that really teach you a lot about yourself and how attraction, magnetism, thoughts, all of this works, would be I love this channel. It actually carried me through my college days. It's called Spirit Science. It's a wonderful channel. It's got a lot of complex information, but it has been made into cartoons and short snippets, and it's super super fun. Um, I really dove into my spiritual practices, Judy. I would suggest people to look into alternative healing, holistic modalities, because it actually takes and rips up issues from the roots as opposed to stuffing it under a rug with medication. Therapy is great too, but for me, it didn't really work. For me, it was a little too lengthy. I feel with regular talk therapy, it might take 30 years to reach to a conclusion because you're going through the process yourself. With alternative healing modalities, you also go through it. Number one thing is self responsibility, but the modalities and the process is it blasts things out. I can't go into all that right now, but it's just so effective because you're going to the root of the issue, knowing that we are all energy as opposed to just stuffing it from the top. Meditation is, people have all kinds of opinions and views on meditation. Some people think it's just to block out thoughts and not have any thought at all. It's not actually. Meditation helps you become the observer where you're watching what you're thinking as opposed to getting involved in it. My mother does meditation classes and she does a lot of seminars and workshops. She's a very well known energy healer and teacher. I can leave links for all that. Her program is known as Super Consciousness Studies, and you can find it on YouTube, on all social media platforms. Just getting into those kinds of different forms of thinking instead of getting too wrapped up in everyday societal things and what other people think. If you can really work on somehow connecting to the self instead of escaping even further and finding more codependent situations, that's going to be the hardest thing anyone ever does, but it's going to be the most rewarding thing because you actually see magic happening. Like I've actually seen the most serendipitous, miraculous, surreal things happen in my life, and the more begets more. So the more I started seeing that and the more I tapped into myself, the more I saw the truth of myself and how to kind of navigate this matrix and the divine matrix. And you just get more and more strong, more and more empowered to a point where you're not free of anything. I still have moments where I just suddenly start crying and I deal with, past Triggers are a big thing because they still lie in your body, which is why body work is so important. So when you have had any kind of sexual abuse trauma or emotional abuse trauma, violence, the cellular memory in our body holds on to all that. So even if we've cleaned ourselves out mentally and we've forgiven and we've done all that work, our body still holds on to it. So you'll suddenly get triggered. So it's very important to kind of be aware of that and give yourself a lot of self love. If you want to go and sit in the tub, go and sit in the tub. Work can wait. You have to be able to schedule in that balanced way of living. So you're giving yourself that time, and that's your own personal boundary.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing that. The reason why I always ask this to my guest is because, again, typical thing is go see a therapist, and it's so hard to find therapists, like a year wait, like 6 months wait. And then when I had therapist, for instance, true story, my therapist fell asleep on me on the phone and I had to wake him up. So, and sometimes, I respect therapists, but at the same time, I feel like they are a little bit, given privileged life that not so many therapists experienced these kind of adversities. So
I have seen
I
many
cannot relate to them.
I've seen many therapists, and I feel like most of the times they're just going through a checklist.
Yes,
And the
yes.
only thing that has really helped pull me out of some really crazy, dark, dark places has been energy work, has been Reiki. Reiki is just the most common word that people hear, but there are so many types of energy healing modalities. And I've used, and my mother and her, healer people, I mean, they use all of them. And a lot of these healing modalities stem from European countries. So Finnish, Swedish, I feel like a lot of these areas are very advanced in that type of thinking. So from Reiki to access consciousness to tasso to constellation work. I'm just giving these names, but there's so many modalities. That is what pulled me out. And these were healers working on me from across the world. There was no physical touching, no nothing. And if I ever got into the stories about those miracles, I need to write a book one day. That is for sure, or a movie. But yeah, that I would really suggest people to just try something new and
You're
go
talking you're
go get
talking
the route.
to you're talking to an award-winning producer. So
Okay, we will talk. So,
producer.
so another channel I would love to suggest to people is watch Teal Swan, Spirit Science, and Super Consciousness Studies is my mom's program, and Spirit Science and Teal Swan, great for people to just dive in and just even see what the heck I'm talking about here. So yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much for wealth of information. And then I am very, very, very sorry that this adversity happened to you and in
I'm
your life.
grateful for it.
You
And
are
for the gift.
you are absolutely gorgeous,
Oh,
stunning,
you.
beautiful, and your voice is just amazing. She's such an amazing vocalist, and she had, just to let audience know, helped Genuine Voices, which the nonprofit I started and it ran 12 years.
Oh,
She went back to India and then did the fundraiser in her backyard and then raise money for these children in America who are incarcerated, and then so that they can continue studying music. So that meant so much to me, Tanya. I will never forget your kindness and action and initiative. And then you should be very proud that you helped so many. And I know your journey has been very hard, but I'm very proud of you. And you're so beautiful.
oh,
And you are strong and you're resilient and you are understanding this adversity and giving a voice to it, to yourself, but not to yourself, but coming to
okay.
myself, and then talking about this, and then bringing awareness to what sexual abuse does to people like us.
Right.
Or
One
some,
thing I want to add to that is
yeah,
yes, sexual abuse can make you want that more later on in life in really weird ways, and you don't even realize that that's what you're actually
it
wanting.
happened to me. It happened to me, and I didn't even realize, like you said. So it's very sad cycle, but that's kind of the reason why I wanted to start this platform so that we can freely talk about any kind of adversity, unapologetically.
Hmm.
And then you should never feel shame talking about this because you are not the one who created that. So, anyways, last question. What is a gift that came from adversity?
Well, in one simple line, the gift that came from adversity was me meeting and really truly understanding and knowing myself for the first time in 30 years. So it's safe for me to say I had my Saturn return, and man was my butt kicked. But yeah, it's definitely, finally I feel I can drop the shackles of codependency. I love being with myself. I love myself. I know myself better, and I'm continuing to get to know myself. And that's the greatest gift. Juri, thank you so much for doing what you do. First of all, Genuine Voices is such a genuine and perfect name, and for what you do. You are a genuine voice, and you give voice to a lot of your passions and experiences, which a lot of others use as catharsis through you. So thank you for doing what you do. This is amazing. It's like you helped me shed another layer of fear, which I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. So thank you for doing what you do. Oh my God, did I just tear up?
You're making me cry for real.
This is real, guys.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my God.
I love what you said about shackle. What is it again?
It's like
Codependency.
the shackles of codependency are falling away.
Shackle of codependency is falling away. That is the most powerful thing I've ever heard because codependency is the one that I struggle because I didn't have that from my dad, from my father that I craved. And some people even told me you have a daddy issue. It's so like some guys target the girls with the daddy issue, which is nasty. But I've heard like if you give attention and love just a little bit and then they're all yours because you have daddy issue, that's the nastiest thing I've ever heard. But when the speaking of truth, human trafficking, sex trafficking, all these kind of things happens because with daddy issue. What is it? Shackle.
Shackles of codependency. The truth here is, Juri, it's a generational thing for sure. So my father is the son of a army major general. Okay, so he was the dean of the Armed Forces Medical College in India, and he was also a major. Now, being a, the youngest of three born to someone like that, and generationally speaking, culturally speaking as well, it molds you into a certain type of person. So I'll be very open about this, and I know my father, recognizes all this. But growing up, my father was not necessarily there present emotionally. He was very much there present practically, getting me to win all my shows, getting me into competitions, writing, music, but it was all about go, 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 do, win, win, win. So the practical side of life was very well handled and taken care of. And unfortunately, at that point, my mother was going through her own adversities, and she did not allow herself to express herself or have a voice. And she had her spiritual awakening much later. But in that interim, in that time, I was very young, and as a kid you tend to absorb and sponge in whatever is happening. So I totally took in my father's energy of I could never what's the word, I could never not please him, I could never if I did my best, it was never good enough in some ways. You know what I mean? So I kept searching for that in all my relationships. So I ended up attracting men who I could never be good enough for, no matter how amazing I was or I am. You know what I mean? Like, again, knowing your own value, because I'm constantly repeating this story that is running in my head. It's like a purgatory. You're constantly repeating the same cycle till you recognize where this is coming from, understand the wisdom, because parents do their best as well. Barring, I know there's very, very scary situations like yourself, but that is stemming from your father's childhood, which was never healed. And I don't know what trauma he's gone through to be that. You know what I mean? But yes, so thank you for bringing up the parental thing, because a lot of it was that I never got that. So you become fiercely independent even as a child, and you've got your defensive walls up, and you're constantly repeating something and getting yourself into mess till you figure it out. And
Affirmation.
yes,
You're craving for affirmation, but that you never gotten it.
validation.
Yeah.
Yes, I was never validated, so I never knew if what I was doing, saying, or being was accepted or right. And I kept trying to match up with everything and everyone around me. But let's be real, I'm very unique, and so is everyone. But I especially don't like to follow the crowd, so I kind of stuck out even more, and I would keep looking for other people's validation and keep asking. Even if I had an idea, I would go to 10 other people and be like, hey, do you think this is okay? Do you think this is okay? I went to my college professors, and some of them shot me down. Like, these brilliant ideas, they go like, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to like toot my own horn, but what I mean is, as a kid, when you have an idea and they're like, oh, that's a very noble idea, but it's not going to work. So, going through series of that, your self-confidence and self-esteem is completely destroyed, till you and then you start destroying yourself, self-sabotage, till you can't take it anymore. And then
Yes, I wrote on my book. I was doing a musical, and then my lead actor told me that, Juri, you are one of the most stunning women I've ever met.
yes, you
Yeah,
are.
you have. Thank you. But yeah, you have the lowest self-esteem. What the hell?
Most people who are really, really genuinely, authentically good and pure will have the lowest self-esteem and confidence. This is the irony.
The thing is, so that's when I told him about my child sex abuse, and then that I never felt beautiful,
Mhm.
and validation wasn't there, affirmation wasn't there, and therefore I attracted this abusive man as well. So I can completely relate. But I'm very happy that you are at 30 years old, that you have learned so much. I'm 45, I'm still learning, and I wish I had that wisdom when I was 30.
We
And
all
it's never too late. And this is exactly why I wanted to start this show, A Gift from Adversity. So I can't thank you enough
I
for
can't thank
coming to
you.
my show today, and then making me cry for the first time.
No, this couldn't have been more real than this. And I'll just leave you with one positive thing. Every generation learns the previous generation's lessons quicker. So what my mother learned, and when she had her spiritual awakening, I literally had the same, like, I had this understanding, but I was 7 or 10 years younger than when she had it. So you can be sure that your kids would be way wiser and way more tapped into all this, maybe 7 or 10 years younger than when you started understanding all this. So that's how the cycle rolls. And I don't know if you've seen the movie Lucy, but at the end, I love this one line. What is the purpose of humanity and life? It's to share. It's to keep passing down the knowledge, right? So that you keep evolving like a flower, kind of unfurling. This is open. This. Anyways, I'm going off into tangents. Thank you so much, Juri, for having me. This was literally like me shedding another layer, and you helped me do that. So thank you so much.
I love you so much,
Tears
Tanya.
are healing. So we totally got the elixirs today.
Thank you. I love you so much, and I admire you and respect you. And then I cannot be prouder.
Oh, me
that
too. Me too. Same for you. Trust me, we're on the same page. Thank you, Juri.
Absolutely. I just want to leave one comment to you and then our audience. I am the love that I seek.
I am the love that I seek. Absolutely. Beautiful affirmation. Oh, yeah. Practical tool affirmations every day. I do affirmations every single day, and I haven't stopped for 2 years, and you won't believe it. Every single one of my affirmations have come true.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much again. And then thank you everyone for watching, listening. A gift from university. We have a wonderful guest coming up. I'm very, very grateful. I have probably about 40 guests coming up.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah, March, April, even all the way. So I will plan to keep doing this and in conversation and opening up to this very difficult issues, but trying to get rid of the stigma. So thank you again, everyone, and then I will see you next time.
Thank you.